Alright, I put a message in there. You fill my water up. We're gonna get to it. Be as picky as you want. Okay. I'll be right back. Oh, great. What's up? Ah. Okay, I did it. No struggle. You know what's funny is before when I was like went to go get a drink of water, went to the bathroom and everything, I was like, oh, let me just do some push-ups before. So I did 20 and then I came back to you guys. I'm gonna do them after I read. I'm out of breath here. Terrible. Alright. It's added to the tab, don't worry. After I read, I'll do the rest. I do have a push-up cam on my iPad, but you know. Oh yeah. Do you like how I paid for stream avatars, but I never did anything about those? Anyways, okay. I'm not going to waste any more time. I want to get to reading Reckless's story. So, this is chapter 1 and 2. And we'll probably read both because it's about 3K words, you said? Okay. Let's start reading. And we're going to offer Reckless a bunch of feedback on this story, alright? No worries. No worries. I'm not too worried about the word count right now. Because I want to get the 2 done. I'll do all those push-ups afterwards. Don't worry. Okay. So, this story is called Corporate Babylon. This is one of those like Pulp Fiction, mystery detective stories. So, I'm excited. I'm excited to read it, Reckless. I'm excited to see how far you got. Whew. Chapter 1, San Francisco, 67, Summer of Love. I'm literally out of breath, guys. I just ripped off like 4. Whew. Sitting here this whole time, and then I have to do 40 push-ups is crazy. All right. Dick Half-Mast glares through the porthole-sized window at the alley-turned parking lot, his eyes locked on the decaying dumpster across the way. The little bastards are at it again. Damn cowards won't face me in the daylight, he mutters, sipping his Alka-Seltzer and bourbon. The fizz and burn work slow against the boulder in his head. While his mind pieces together another Rube Goldberg machine, a sharp knock cracks against the door to his office. Tracy Jones leans through the doorway, cinnamon swirl hair tumbling into her emerald eyes. You've got a live one, Dick, she smirks, resting her head on the doorframe. Better not be another one of your new age types. The words came out as a sigh, meant to sound clear and concise, but landing like gravel. Something better. Her eyes glint predatory, playful, as they lock on him. Oh, her eyes glint, predatory, playful, as they lock on him. As long as they can actually pay this time, I'm not waiting through another damn drum circle to keep the lights on. Dick catches his reflection in the window, mouth moving like a fish, gasping for air as he straightens his tie and shirt into something resembling professionalism. The man staring back isn't fooling anyone. Shabby, crooked, desperate. But hey, it's the best he can do. Standing straight at her full 5'4", Tracy tilts her head, mock concern dripping from her voice. Dick, how are we supposed to be model citizens if we don't help the locals? She giggles. A groan claws its way up from somewhere deep and ancient before Dick can stop it. He turns the office, closing in around him like a bad idea. The creaking fan stirs stale air over piles of flies and pink envelopes on the desk. The narrow path between furniture makes him feel like a rat in a cage. Sliding into his second-hand dinner chair, the vinyl sagging beneath him, he swipes the problems of tomorrow into a drawer. What and who are we looking at this time? He says, the words blurting out. Something juicy. Fancy lady, big doe eyes, real diamonds, not the costume junk. Maybe even your type. Tracy flashes a devilish grin. The boulder in Dick's head starts rolling again. Send her in. We need to make a dent in the bills if we're ever going to get off the ground. He finishes the last of his morning fizz-fire cocktail and tosses the empty glass at Tracy. Do something with that, will ya? Tracy snatches the glass with a smirk. You're welcome. Don't screw this up. Outside, murmured voices drift through the door. Then it swings open and she steps in, smelling of lavender, looking like Cleopatra come to life. Please, have a seat. Dick gestures towards the folding chair, wishing it were something more dignified. Why, thank you, Mr. Half-Mast, she says, pausing before sitting gingerly, her purse clutched tight. Lavender, class, trouble. The words churn in Dick's mind as flashes of cash and top-shelf liquor briefly dance across his thoughts. He leans back in his chair, furrowing his brow like a man trying too hard to look smart. Tracy tells me you need help with a passing. Someone close, I assume? Miss Levidan, but please call me Inez. Inez? She smiles weakly. My father, he came home saying strange things, pacing, ranting about all sorts of wild things. Then she shifts uneasily, her eyes darting around the room. Then he just stopped. Pulling a handkerchief from her purse, she dabs her eyes. By the time anyone got to our property, he was gone. Her voice trembles as she clings to her well-bred composure. Coughing, Dick leans forward, trying to sound comforting. I'm sorry to hear that, Inez. Half standing, he leans over the desk to pat her shoulder before grabbing a fresh sheet of paper from the filing cabinet behind him. What do the paramedics have to say? Sniffling, she stares into the middle distance. It's all such a blur. They were saying things about his lips, his skin. Heart attack, they said. But I couldn't make sense of the rest through all the questions. She pauses. Thankfully, Gerald came by to handle most of the business. Tell me about Gerald. What's his relationship to you, or your father? Just a man he worked with on a recent project. He came to a few dinner parties, but mostly because he's good at navigating government bureaucracy. What was the project? Something requiring a specialist? Security work for the federal government. And what was the job? I'm not sure exactly. He just said it was some construction project, keeping his men stuck here. He complained about extra duties piling up on them. More than guarding? Yes, he said if he'd known about the extra duties, he'd have scheduled things differently, avoided the fatigue. Dick nods, jotting notes. I'll start with Gerald. Maybe he can tell me more. Does your father have an office in the city? Yes, near the Golden Gate Bridge. Most of his business was through teleconference with his secretary, Janet. I'll give you the address and her number. After a few more notes, Dick sets his pen down and offers his hand. That should be enough to get started. Give Tracy all the details she needs. She'll handle billing. Deposit to start with daily rates after. Inez startles slightly but quickly regains her composure, shaking his hand. Thank you, Mr. Half-Mast. Anything you can find will be a huge help. Tracy! Dick calls, and she pops her head through the door. Go ahead and draw up the contract for Miss Levidan, Dick says, his voice sharper now. Friends and family rate, 500 per. Tracy raises a brow but doesn't argue. Sure, right this way, Miss Levidan. The door closes behind them. Dick sits back, rubbing his temples. Government contracts. A fat cat losing it. This stinks to high heaven. He sighs, grabs his checkbook, and opens another pink envelope. The afternoon sun glares out the windshields of parked cars, making the sprawling office park feel even more sterile. Dick paces near a faded red sedan, a cigarette burning slowly between his fingers as he watches Tracy rummage through the trunk. The two of them look out of place here, like a set dressing designed to emphasize how sleek and modern the place wants to be. What's your read on this? Dick asks, cocking his head as Tracy leans in deeper. She straightens, flashing a smirk. Rich guy comes home talking weird, then drops dead. His daughter panics. Bureaucrat shows up to clean house. Sounds fishy for sure. Dick takes a long drag, flicking ash into the pavement. Keep your head on a swivel in there. Take in as much as you can. Best case, we rule this workout together. Worst case, we're in for a headache. Tracy nods, slamming the trunk shut. Lead the way, boss. Dick stomps out a cigarette, exhales a cloud of smoke, and the two of them head toward the building. Okay. Before I keep going, I am going to keep going. This sounds really good. This first chapter sounds great. I love Dick. I love Tracy. I love the whole vibe. Your descriptions and setting the scene is awesome. I didn't really find anything awkward when I was reading. Like it all seemed to flow. Well, again, what did I say? I love Dick. All right. I feel like I cut too much from the interview. It seemed pretty smooth to me. It seemed it seemed pretty smooth to me. I'm not gonna lie. The flow seemed great. Um, if you think that there's more context, like obviously this it like you're gonna be able to do the most with context in this moment with the interview. So if you feel like there's more information that you want to include but you're not sure how, including it in the interview is probably a good idea because it definitely is brief, but it didn't feel brief to me. Like it just assumed that's how it went. I'm sorry, guys. I love Dick Half-Mast, the character in Reckless's story. Um, but yeah, I would say it. I would say it flowed really well. You have a great job of setting the scene. I didn't find any awkward paragraphs, really. I love this line. He turns, the office closing in around him like a bad idea. That's awesome. And the creaking fan stirs stale air over piles of flies and pink. This is great. This description here, this paragraph here is awesome. Um, I think maybe the only awkward part is when the scene shifts to them outside. Um, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if this is poor, or not. You might want to do like a brief like page break maybe here in between this scene, or maybe like a brief sentence of he goes outside or something. I don't know. That's my initial reaction, but what do you guys think? Do you guys think that this fits here? So as the door closes behind him, Dick sits back, rubbing his temples. Government contracts, a fat cat losing it sinks to high heaven. He sighs, grabs his checkbook, and opens another pink envelope. The afternoon sun glares off the windshields of parked cars, making like. Do you think this transition here is too sudden and immediate, or do you think it works? Maybe at the very least you include like a little like time skip symbol, you know, like one of these type deal. I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think this is up to personal preference, to be completely honest. It doesn't necessarily alter the flow of the story, but it might just be a little confusing. Okay. Spicy, you come in at the worst times. You come at the very worst times. The transition does feel off. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. It definitely caught my attention when I was reading it. So it's up to you, Reckless. I would take a look at it. Um, yeah, your descriptions are awesome, man. They're really, really good. I love it. What is this very first paragraph? The little bastards are at it again. Damn cowards won't face me in the daylight. Um, oh, raccoons. I don't know. Maybe you want to like put a brief line in here because this very beginning opening paragraph I just thought was a little confusing. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe a single line about raccoons or something. Because it's just like it's your opening paragraph. It's what the readers are gonna lock onto first when they do read the story, anyways. Um, because like, in what way does this imply raccoons? He glares through the window at the alley turned parking lot, which is great. His eyes locked on to the decaying dumpster across the way. The little bastards are out again. Damn cowards won't face me in the daylight, which is great because like, what's he talking about? I don't know. I think this paragraph is slightly awkward. That's all because it's a little confusing, but I think it's like too vague that I don't know what is going on. Um, Other than that, I think it's great. I'm gonna keep reading. I'm gonna read the next chapter as well. Yeah, I don't think it feels long-winded. I don't think you really. I think the flow is great, Reckless. I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about the flow. Maybe just that transition there feels a little quick. Okay, I'm gonna move on. We're gonna read chapter 2. Low lighting glints off the wood paneling, and the smell of fresh pine cleaner lingers in the air. Comfy chairs flank a broad desk, where brilliant letters spell out Levidan's solutions. in crisp silver. A bright young woman sits behind the desk, her hands neatly folded. Her gaze flickers to the door as Dick and Tracy step inside, looking like they wandered in from the wrong side of town. How can we help you today? She asks, her voice bright but cautious. Dick strolls up to the desk, trying to put on his best smile. Good afternoon. Your boss is dead. Inez sent me to retrace his last day. You're Janet, right? Behind him, Tracy snorts, muffling a laugh with her hand. The woman, Janet apparently, blinks, her smile faltering. Yes, Pablo. He passed. I'm sorry, who did you say you were here to see again? Inez says you can help us piece together Pablo's last day, Dick says, his tone steady, almost casual. Janet's eyes sharpen, a flicker of recognition cutting through her daze. Oh, right, the detective, right? Dick grins, holding up his arms like he's taking a bow. That's me, and you're the person who can help. Janet flushes, the color rising quickly to her cheeks. She ducks her head, shuffling through a stack of papers. Well, I think I have this. Her hands tremble slightly as she pulls a sheet from a day planner and holds it out to him. She glances up again, her face still red. It's his schedule for the last day he worked. Eyebrows arching, Dick takes the page from Janet. Good grief, it's all meetings. He glances over the page quickly before slipping it into his pocket. Can you point us to Gerald's office? Inez said he should be expecting us. Sure, just a moment. Let me make sure he's in. Janet picks up the phone, her fingers already dialing. As Janet speaks in hushed tones, Tracy leans toward Dick, lowering her voice. Any secret big money evil guy meetings? Nothing at first glance. Dick rubs his ribs absently, then adds, Let's see what the expert can tell us, though. Janet sets the phone down, offering them a weak smile. Unfortunately, Mr. Molasses is busy dealing with the fallout from Mr. Levidane's passing. If you don't mind waiting for a moment, he should be here soon. He should be free soon. Dick grunts. Sure, we'll look over the information while he finishes up. He's already pulling the page from his pocket as he strides toward the row of stiff lobby chairs, barely finishing his sentence. Tracy lingers for a moment, her smile curling up into something sharper. So, Janet, she says, voice syrupy sweet, do you know all the dirty secrets? Any juicy water cooler gossip? Her eyes gleam like a cat eyeing a bird with a broken wing. Janet snorts and tilts her head toward Dick. I'm sure you've got plenty yourself. With him? Never. Tracy waves a dismissive hand, her eyes rolling to the ceiling. But seriously, how do you keep it together around here? Janet shrugs, leaning back slightly. Honestly, most people aren't too bad. The tough types dodge me, terrified of getting hit with updated orders, and the bigwigs are too buried in their own schemes to bother. I even get time to read every now and then, between meetings. Oh yeah? Tracy leans closer over the desk, lowering her voice like they're conspirators. You reading something dirty? Janet almost topples out of her chair, her face flushing. Oh, God, no, spiritual stuff. She grabs a battered paperback from the edge of her desk and shoves it towards Tracy. The cover shows a garish, off-kilter eye, surrounded by psychedelic swirls of purple, orange, and blue. The title reads, The Lazy Third Eye, Whip It Back into Shape. Tracy snorts, turning the book over in her hands. I've never seen a holy book like this. Janet leans in, eyes sparkling. It's all about being more in tune with the universe and finding your true self. Plus, it's quick and to the point. None of this endless meandering. Flam is really for people on the go. Tracy flips the book over, eyeing the author photo. A man with a brilliant smile sits cross-legged on a cushion, his beard and slick ponytail glinting under soft studio lighting. He's winking at the camera, but the effect is unsettling, like he knows something you don't. Yeah, I can totally see it. So you just read the book? She asks. Luckily, he's based right here. Janet beams, like a teenage girl with a crush. He has meetings most weeknights where he helps his readers put the book into action. Read the book, go to the meetings, and get enlightened. That does sound about right, Tracy says with a smirk. He's the real deal. Gerald, Mr. Molasses, is the one who showed me the book in the first place. He wouldn't mess around with anyone nefarious. Well, if he's rubbing shoulders with an expert, he must be someone to listen to. Tracy's grin widens. Janet rolls her eyes but laughs. Take the book and go to a meeting. Worst case, you waste an evening trying to better yourself. Tracy tosses the book into her messenger bag. You know what? You're right. If this gig goes south, I could always join a cult. Janet giggles. Exactly. Always have a plan B. Plan B it is. Tracy waves and saunters back to the lobby chairs, plopping down next to Dick. I figured out where to go after this, she says, patting her bag. You're gonna love it. Dick eyes her sideways. So what's the verdict? Secretary secretly running this outfit? Tracy snickers, her tone suddenly somber. Even better, a holy man. She holds out the battered paperback like it's a sacred artifact. Dick squints at it, then takes it reluctantly, holding it as if it might bite. What exactly is this? His eyes scan the cover briefly before flipping it over to the back. The author photo makes him recoil, and he immediately shoves it back toward Tracy. Good grief! You brought this thing back here? Don't be so hasty, Dick. Tracy elbows him, a grin tugging at her lips. This man, the great and learned Flam, will get you in touch with yourself. The lovely Janet was generous enough to let me borrow it, and guess what? Turns out Flam rubs elbows with Mr. Molasses. She arches her eyebrows suggestively, looking like the cat that ate the canary. Flam, huh? Odd name. Dick pulls the day planner page from his pocket and smooths it out with one hand. His fingers land on a meeting labeled Flam, the security detail. Why does a guy who sits on pillows need heavy-duty security? Tracy leans over to glance at the page and smirks. Enlightenment's a dangerous gig, Dick. All those cosmic truths probably make people want to kill you. Dick doesn't laugh. Instead, he folds the paper with deliberate care and tucks it back into his pocket. Well, let's find out this great and learned Flam has any answers. Tracy tilts her head back towards Janet, her voice low. What about our meeting with Gerald? Dick scoffs, his lips curling into a grimace. I should have known he'd turn out like all the people he's hired to deal with. Back in the Pacific, I dealt with more than my fair share of his type. Just enough polish to keep people off their backs, but nothing going on behind it. He leans back, folding his arms. We'll just have to figure out a way to run into him somewhere else. Tracy grins. Oh, and catch him off guard? Maybe then we'll figure out why he's just so happened to be in the right place at the right time. Dick nods. That's the plan. Let's get out of here. I'll drop you off at the records office while I swing by the post office with those bills. He flicks his thumb toward the car, already standing. As they head toward the door, Tracy raises her voice, calling out with mock cheer. Janet, tell Gerald something came up, and we'll just have to get back with him another day. Janet looks up, startled, but before she can reply, the two are already halfway to the parking lot. The sizzling blacktop outside bakes under the afternoon sun, but inside the diner, big band music hums over the low buzz of conversation. Dick sits hunched in the booth, sipping black coffee that tastes as burnt as the air smells, his blown-out senses struggling to keep up with Tracy. I'm telling you, Dick, Flam's probably just another scam artist, but if he's rubbing elbows with Gerald, that makes him our scam artist. The coffee wasn't doing much for his headache, but at least it gave him something to hold while Tracy rattled off theories. His focus drifts to their surroundings. The place looks like it was built half run down, with sagging bench cushions in the booths, and a crowd of regulars slowly crushing the stools on the counter, relics of yesteryear holding on for dear life. It's a great description, Reckless. Great description. Look here. Tracy holds out some paperwork. It says here that he owns a place called the Focus Factory and that it's being held by a religious entity called the Third Eye Consortium. I guess that's where he's working over his readers. Dick takes the papers and just sets them down on the table. I would be willing to bet this isn't his first rodeo. I assume since everything was through shells, no proper name or anything. None that I can see. It's all entities and lawyers. Dude must be wary of people looking into his business. She shrugs, taking a sip from her Coke float. So we have some sort of guru who is super savvy, Gerald the fixer for government problems. Lebanon meets him to discuss security, not to mention the big water treatment plant contract. Lots of angles. Dick sighs, rubbing his temples as his third eye threatens to explode out of his forehead. Dick stares into the remains of his coffee, the diner's overhead lights buzzing like tired neon sign. Tracy flips through the battered copy of The Lazy Third Eye and jots a few notes on a napkin. So he's got a place called the Focus Factory, she says, tapping her pen thoughtfully. Belongs to something called the Third Eye Consortium, some self-styled spiritual outfit. If Flam's rubbing elbows with Gerald, he's more than likely just another acid guru. Dick sets his mug down, massaging the spots under his ribs. This doesn't feel like a side hustle. Pablo Levidan meets with Flam about security, then keels up after raving about conspiracies. Gerald shows up to manage things. None of it adds up. Tracy nods, pushing her napkin of scrawled notes toward him. We need to find out how Flam fits into all this. He's got to be the key to Gerald's little game. Dick sighs, the tension carving new lines into his forehead. Guess we start with the Focus Factory. No sense tiptoeing around these wackos. If Flam's funneling money into weird shells and hooking up with government contracts, I want to know why. They both slide out of the booth. Dick tosses a few coins on the table, and Tracy scoops up her notes. The hum of the diner's big band music fades as they head for the door. Think you'll fit in at that psychedelic enlightenment center, old man? Tracy grins, catching Dick's eye. He grimaces, checking his coat pocket for his flask. Doubt it, but if Flam's connected to Pablo's death, we won't find anything by sitting here. Let's get going. They step outside into a swirl of late afternoon haze. A ragged busker strums a half-hearted tune on the sidewalk, singing something about the age of Aquarius. Tracy glances his way, then shakes her head. Get ready to open your third eye, she says wryly, patting the book stuffed in her messenger bag. Or have it pried open. Dick lights a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his tired face. As long as the job pays, I don't care how many eyes I need to open. They climb into Dick's sedan, the upholstery cracked and sun-faded. He twists the key and the engine rumbles awake. With a quick glance in the rearview mirror, Dick pulls onto the street, headed towards the Focus Factory. Torrid answers, and if the day is any indication, even more trouble. Okay. So, first off, love the energy. I think not said that and struggle. The energy here is great. I love the characters, Tracy, Dick, Half-Mask, even Janet. Their interactions are fantastic. And you really have a great flow happening here. And it's I totally can feel the Pulp Fiction, the griminess, the like the vibe that you're trying to get off is great. And you're doing a really good job of that. I have two main points of feedback. Okay. First off, yeah, the third lazy eye whippet, hilarious. You're like this is great. The humor here is awesome. My first initial feedback, and this is something that you got to kind of take with a grain of salt because it goes both ways and it can be a little difficult to discern what is too much. But as a reader, the amount of times that I read that Tracy smiled or grinned or looked, devious, it seemed like almost every single time she talked, you mentioned that she was grinning. And that, like, using an action tag like that is great. And I've said multiple times before that you want to not be afraid of dialogue tags and action tags and whatnot. However, if you're constantly saying that Tracy is smiling and grinning, it tends to give her a bit of a deranged feel, I guess. Like, she is constantly smiling, okay? But I think if you can just tone back the amount of grins, I don't know. This is something that I just picked up on as I was writing, and it seemed like she was just always grinning. And that's fine. She can always be grinning. But you're like the way you're reminding us of it, I think it feels like it's a little much. That is something that is like, you got to learn the balance, because you want to include these dialogue tags, okay? But sometimes it can be too much. And like, there's a point where you had no dialogue tagging, I thought it was great. And I think you only do that one time. Tracy says with a smirk. Just gotta find a balance. I would agree. You gotta find a balance. It's something that can be difficult to do, because you want to include these dialogue tags, you want to show that she's smiling, but you also want to remove the dialogue tags. Like, you don't need dialogue tags on every single line of dialogue. When you can 100% discern who's speaking by dialogue alone, you don't need a tag. Oh yeah, Spicy. Okay, listen to Spicy. She knows what she's talking about. You don't need the tag every single time, and you do this one time. There's one line of dialogue where you actually do have no tag, and it's great. Because when you're doing these tags, it becomes a little bit too much, and and it just becomes tired. Like, how many times do I need to know that she's smiling? Like, I already can kind of catch the drift of Tracy's character, and I can pick up on the fact that she's going to be grinning, especially with your awesome descriptions. Looking like the cat that ate the canary, like, this is great, right? Like, you've already set up Tracy's character in such a great way that adding these dialogue tags of her grinning all the time is just becomes tired, because you essentially did such a good job that now you don't exactly need it anymore in a way, right? And I'm not saying to remove them all, but there's definitely a balance. So that's my first. That would be, from like a technical standpoint, my feedback. Now, from a story and developmental feedback, I have one thing to say, and it's this conversation in the diner. Okay? I think, yes, you already tell that she's amused, so it's not, yeah. It just seems a little bit overdone, that's all. But the conversation in the diner, I think this conversation goes on too long. I think, like, you kind of repeat a few things, a few ideas, and it feels slightly redundant, and you almost have, like, needless conversation, and it just kind of messed with the flow. I thought the flow was great up until they stepped out, and then they're still kind of talking about the third eye. That might just be my own personal kind of opinion as I was reading it. But, like, so right here. So they both slide out of the booth. You know, she picks up her notes. You offer a description. This is great. She says, "You think you'll fit in the psychedelic enlightenment center, old man?" You know, and he's like, "I doubt it, but we got to do it. Let's get going, okay?" But then you include this dialogue: "Get ready to open your third eye, or have it pried open." And he's like, "As long as it pays the bills, I don't care about it," right? So these two lines of dialogue are essentially achieving the same exact purpose as these two lines of dialogue, right? Tracy's amused and like, "Oh, are you ready to go to this place?" And Dick is like, "Not really, but whatever. This is what I gotta do. We gotta do it." They step outside, and then you have Tracy amused and like, "Oh, are you ready to go?" And then you have Dick going, "Oh, as long as it pays the bills." So do you see what I'm saying here? These two lines of dialogue essentially are the exact same as these two lines of dialogue. So they feel redundant. Okay, when I read this the second time, it felt needless. The same thing happens when they're talking. Almost, it's right here. I almost thought that this was a bit of a mistake. I think this is a mistake. I think you accidentally included this. So she says, Tracy flips through her battered copy and drops a few notes down. He's got a place called Focus Factory. Belongs to the Third Eye Consortium. Flam's rubbing elbows with Gerald. Okay, so she says this, but then right up here, Tracy holding up paperwork. Look here, it says he owns a place called the Focus Factory, held by a religious entity called the Third Eye Consortium. I guess that's where he's working over with his readers. So this is like, again, essentially the same exact dialogue as this, except with the additional mention of Flam rubbing elbows with Gerald. So you can pretty much completely remove this part, say, it looks like Flam's rubbing elbows with Gerald, and you're achieving the same exact thing. I think so. I think you essentially left this conversation in, because when you're going, I've done this before where like I'm editing my book and like I'll look for problems, scan, but then when I go back and read it, I'm like, oh wait, I should have completely erased this and I just missed it. And I think that's what happens in this conversation, because it feels very bloated. Too much. Okay? And this conversation is great. The scene is great. They're in the diner. Tracy's sipping her ice cream float, whatever, and Dick's just being, the cantankerous kind of thinks he's cool but not guy. Like the scene's awesome. Okay, but then it just becomes tired with the repeated dialogue. You want to make sure, especially with this genre, this pulp fiction, detective story. The dialogue's important, but you have a budget essentially with how much you're going to be using in your story. And if you're including things that are unnecessary, well then you're essentially going directly against the pulp fiction genre that you're trying to achieve. Right? It has to be it's snappy, it's just straight, you know, um, plot device after plot device, less fleshing out characters, more relying on their archetype type deal. You know, you don't necessarily need too much dialogue because Dick Halfmast is exactly who you're intending him to be, and that's the whole point of the story. So that's at least that's my advice. That's my suggestion. Just because you have great flow. Does that make sense? What I'm saying here? Sounds good. Okay. You spend so oh you're writing okay yeah no worries. You spend so much time. I remember talking to you like a month ago about how much you were like making these characters certain archetypes and you did that whole character pyramiding and everything, right? And that has translated onto your writing. Like these characters fit such a perfect mold of who you want them to be, that I don't think you really need too much dialogue to form them even more. And I don't think that's the purpose of the story, anyways. Right? Dick is who he is, and you've set that up. Tracy is the classic, playful girl, kind of following after Dick, and she's got her own way of doing things, and you know, so you don't need to worry. Like the dialogue doesn't have to be super crazy. Now, obviously, it's important, and you do a good job of this dialogue. You really are playing into uh, these characters, um, but it can be a little much. So my leaving notes would be you basically avoid the redundancy here, and I think that this truly is just a mistake on your part. Like you missed it, but this is the more difficult one. Essentially, two different conversations that achieve the exact same thing, and you want to avoid that because then it becomes repetitive, becomes too much. And this is something that we're all like. I do this all the time, right? Like I tend to get lost in the dialogue when I write, and going back, I'm like, holy crap! Like, can they just shut up already? Like, I didn't need to write the whole page of dialogue that essentially achieved what the first page achieved. I think that was a joke. I was trying to work in the ending. Forgot. Okay, got it. Got it. And the difficult part is this is great lines. Like these two essentially like think you'll fit in at the psychedelic enlightenment center, old man. Doubt it, but if flames connected, we won't be right. Like this is a great conversation, and so is this one. Right, get ready to have your third eye opened or have it pried open. As long as the job pays, I don't care how many eyes I need. Like this is great, right? This is such a good job of showing these characters and progressing the story, but you don't need both. And unfortunately, my personal opinion is that you should remove one of them. And it's up to you to figure out which one you like least. I, you don't have to. And again, this is I'm not writing your story, but this is just from a reader's perspective. It's like what Stephen King says, kill your darlings. You're going to write something that you absolutely love, and when you go back to edit it, you're going to have to remove it. It's just the nature of it. If Dick is a subject in one sentence, you don't need to use his proper nouns in the next sentence. It doesn't hurt for most names, but I think because his name sticks out, it takes away from the narrative. Yeah, yeah. You do use Dick a lot. You do use his name a lot. Actually, that's a really good point because this is essentially third person limited, right? So it's from Dick's perspective. So you don't actually need to say Dick a lot. That's very true. Dick and Tracy? Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Noel, how's it going? Keto chill? Why? What did I do? What did I do? Yeah, that's actually, honestly, Struggle, that's really good advice that I didn't pick up on. It's great. You do use Dick too much. This is third person limited. You don't need to say his name so often. Okay? There's ways to get around that. This is from his perspective. It's different with Tracy. Yeah, the names are gold. You use Dick too much. How else do you want me to read this story and talk about it? All right. I need to stretch 1 second. I'm gonna. So, Reckless, did you have any other questions on like how it fits together and whatnot? Like, did we answer any questions that you might have had? Is dick a bad word? No, it's not a bad word. What? You mean because I don't cuss? Because I don't use cuss words? Look out, Dooney. I'm stretching, buds. No, I don't think it's a cuss word, no. You're doing good, just left work? That's fun. Where do you work, Noel? Oh, my legs. Holy. Why are you trying to dox him? I'm not, I'm not. You don't have to answer. Some people call someone a D to be mean. I got more in the queue. Technically. I did want to read, Sklo's again, if you don't mind, Sklo. I'm not gonna go off, guys. I never will. Don't worry. You can count on me. No, I'm not like that. I say, "Aw, nuts. What are you nuts? Oh man, nuts." I went through a nuts phase when I was a kid. I'm not even joking. I was big on nuts. Dang it. Dang it. I need to think before I speak.